Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Tiff, Tin Man Taylor, and today I'll react to my third and final scary storyteller channel for you all. And this one is Mr. Nightmare, and the video I picked out to react to of his is 7 disturbing disappearances that make no sense. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag, shall we? Okay, here we go.
In June 2014, a 28-year-old German man named Lars Matank traveled to Varna, Bulgaria with a group of friends.
Okay.
They were on vacation, enjoying the beach town, the cheap drinks, and the nightlife. Lars was, by all accounts, a calm, quiet guy. He wasn't someone known to get into fights or cause trouble. But while out one night at a bar, Lars reportedly got into an argument with a group of local men, possibly over a football rivalry. The fight left him with a ruptured eardrum, which meant he couldn't fly home with his friends. The doctor told him he needed to stay behind and let it heal. His friends offered to stay with him, but Lars insisted they return to Germany without him. He claimed he'd be fine. He just needed a few days to rest.
This is why you don't get into fights with anybody, because you might get yourself injured to the point where you can't fly back home. And I get it, a ruptured ear, you get on the airplane, you really probably would feel dizzy or unbalanced or something. So it was wise for him to stay there. But I got a feeling that he's going to be in trouble. But let's just see what happened next, shall we?
Alone in Bulgaria, Lars checked into a cheap hotel near the airport. What happened over the next few days remains one of Europe's most chilling disappearances. Lars began acting strangely. He called his mother several times, sounding panicked. He told her to cancel his credit cards. He said people were following him. At one point, he left the hotel in the middle of the night, claiming he was being watched by 4 mysterious men. He even texted his mom, asking what the side effects of an antibiotic he'd been prescribed were. His behavior kept escalating. The hotel staff described him as nervous, pacing, and constantly checking the windows. Then, on July 8th, the day he was scheduled to fly home, Lars arrived at Varna Airport, and things took a dramatic turn. Surveillance footage from the airport shows him walking into the terminal calmly at first, but within minutes, he appears agitated. He's seen speaking to a staff member, then backing away nervously. Suddenly, without any visible trigger, Lars sprints through the terminal, dashes through the automatic doors, and runs at full speed across the airport parking lot, leaving behind his luggage, passport, and all of his belongings. The last known footage of him shows him vanishing into the trees near a construction site. No one has seen him since. His disappearance has become a breeding ground for theories. Some believe he had a psychotic break, potentially brought on by a reaction to an antibiotic he was taking, or a latent mental illness triggered by stress. Others are convinced something more sinister was happening, that Lars was genuinely being followed or targeted, and whatever he encountered in those final moments was terrifying enough to make him run into the wilderness, barefoot and defenseless. There were alleged sightings in Eastern Europe for years after, but nothing ever confirmed. The strangest part is that his mother insists that Lars was not mentally ill. She believes he was in danger, that he may have stumbled upon something he shouldn't have, or gotten involved in something darker than he realized. The image of him running, wide-eyed and desperate, has been viewed millions of times online, yet no one knows what scared him that badly, and no one knows where he went.
Man, I feel sorry for him and his family. I mean, if I was in this situation, I would have been happy to get on the plane to get back to my homeland, because I wouldn't want to stay there another minute if I was being followed. But I hope one day he is found and somebody tells him it's safe for him to go back home to his family. Let's get to disappearance case number 2, shall we?
In 1912, in the small town of Opelousas, Louisiana, 4-year-old Bobby Dunbar disappeared while on a fishing trip with his family near Swayze Lake. His parents claimed he vanished sometime during the day, possibly while wandering near the water. A massive search was launched immediately. Hundreds of volunteers scoured the area, dragging the lake, searching the woods, and even setting off dynamite underwater in case his body was stuck in the lake bed. But Bobby was gone. The town was devastated. For 8 months, his disappearance became a local obsession. Then, in early 1913, A boy matching Bobby's description was found traveling with a man named William Walters, a traveling handyman in Mississippi. Walters claimed the boy was the son of Julia Anderson, a woman who had entrusted the child to his care, but the Dunbars were convinced the boy was Bobby. Walters was arrested for kidnapping. The authorities arranged for a reunion between the boy and Bobby's mother. At first, the boy didn't recognize her. Witnesses later claimed she hesitated, unsure if the boy was actually hers. But after spending a few days with him, she announced to the press and the police that he was, in fact, her son.
Thank God he was found, because I was believing to think that he drowned. Well, turns out I was wrong. I wonder why the boy would have been hesitant to even go near his mom, unless he's been away from her for that whole year that he probably forgot all of a sudden. I don't know. But that's sad and heartbreaking all at the same time.
Case closed, the newspaper said. Bobby Dunbar had been found, Walters was sentenced to prison, the boy was returned to the Dunbar family and raised as their own. But there was a problem. Julia Anderson, the woman who had entrusted the boy to Walters, showed up. She insisted that was her son, Bruce, and that the Dunbars had taken him. She had no money, no lawyer, and no support. When the courts ruled in favor of the Dunbars, she lost custody forever. She returned to Mississippi heartbroken, labeled a liar and an unfit mother by the press. For decades, Bobby Dunbar lived under that name, unaware of any of this. But in the early 2000s, Bobby's grandson began investigating the family's history. Something didn't sit right. Eventually, the family agreed to a DNA test comparing Bobby's descendants to those of the Dunbars. The results shattered a century of belief. The boy who had grown up as Bobby Dunbar was not biologically related to the Dunbars. He was Bruce Anderson. Julia Anderson had been telling the truth all along, which means the real Bobby Dunbar was never found. To this day, no one knows what actually happened to him, whether he drowned, was abducted, or suffered some unknown fate. His case remains officially unresolved. Meanwhile, an innocent man was imprisoned, and another family raised a child who wasn't theirs, all because the truth was too painful, and the need for closure outweighed the facts.
Unbelievable. I'm surprised that Mrs. Dunbar did not even recognize the fact that the boy was not really hers. She just assumed it was Bobby and made that boy Bruce live under that other alias this entire time and made his mother heartbroken, and the man that was watching him was in prison. I mean, I don't know why you couldn't just accept the facts and let her son go back with her. Now Bruce's descendants were told all a lie that they're not really Dunbar related. I would have been changing my name back to what Bruce's last name was. I wish they had DNA testing back in them days, because they would have been proven wrong and Bruce's mom would have got him back. No questions asked. Man, I just hate that. One family thinks they have their son, but the other is torn apart because the Dunbars are raising him.
In 1928, 9-year-old Walter Collins disappeared from his home in Los Angeles. His mother, Christine Collins, had given him a few coins to go see a movie while she was working. He never came home. Christine went to the police, who launched a search. His case quickly made headlines. This was during a time of rising fears about crime and child abductions, and public pressure on the LAPD was intense. For 5 months, Christine kept the search alive. She printed flyers, organized searches, gave interviews. Then, in August, police in Illinois picked up a boy who claimed to be Walter. He was brought to Los Angeles to be reunited with Christine, in front of reporters. But as the cameras flashed and police beamed with pride and solved the case, when Christine saw the boy, she said, "That's not my son."
Oh, crap. The police think they found the boy that matched her son's description, but they erically picked up the wrong one. You need to send that boy back if it's not her son. Can't believe the police department would make a blundering mistake like that.
The police told her she was wrong. They insisted he had changed from the trauma. They encouraged her to take him home on a trial basis. Christine reluctantly agreed, likely pressured by the public scene. But after just 3 weeks, she returned to the LAPD and again said, "This is not my son." This time, the police had her committed to a psychiatric hospital, claiming she was hysterical and refusing to accept reality. Meanwhile, the boy admitted that he wasn't Walter. His real name was Arthur Hutchins, a runaway who had been pretending to be Walter Collins to get a free trip to California. He thought it might help him to meet his favorite actors. So that meant the police had publicly reunited a grieving mother with a random child, and then punished her when she didn't go along with the lie.
Unbelievable. I'm glad the boy that was pretending to be her son came forward with that, but that is just really hurtful that he would go under that alias and then make the cops think that's him and make his mom go into a psychiatric ward. I hope the police go get her out of there because that's just messed up.
That should have been the end of the story, but it gets darker. Around the same time, a Canadian man named Gordon Northcott was arrested for a string of murders on a chicken farm in Wineville, California. He had lured young boys to his property, imprisoned them, and eventually killed them. When authorities raided the farm, they found evidence linking Northcott to multiple victims. One of those victims, they believed, was Walter Collins. Christine pleaded for answers, but Northcott never gave a clear confession. He was convicted for other murders, but the fate of Walter Collins remained unresolved. Christine spent the rest of her life trying to find out what happened. She never gave up, and the city of Los Angeles never formally apologized for what they did to her, for locking her away when she refused to accept the lie. The story later inspired the film Changeling with Angelina Jolie, but the real horror is how it actually happened. A grieving mother gaslit by the system, a lost child exploited for headlines, and a police force more interested in good press than truth.
Yeah, that happened back in the days in the 30s. But golly, I was still demanding at least to come forward with an apology. Because if they don't, I wouldn't be trusting the Los Angeles Police Department ever again. All they cared about was the publicity, which is wrong. And the fact that the other boy took Walter's name just to be exploited to go to California to meet his favorite actress. I mean, there are other ways of doing that. Now you just made Walter's mom very upset knowing that her real son ain't coming home. If that boy is still alive today, I hope he feels sorry for what he caused.
In August of 2008, a 24-year-old Canadian woman named Kayla Reed vanished from a small town in British Columbia. She had recently moved back in with her parents after going through a rough breakup and was trying to start over. One evening, she told her mother she was going to meet a friend at a coffee shop nearby. She left around 7:30 p.m., wearing a light hoodie and jeans, carrying her phone but no purse. She never showed up for that meeting. Her phone went dark less than an hour later. What followed was an immediate and massive local search. Flyers went up and volunteers swarmed the forested areas around town. Search dogs found nothing, and there was no sign of foul play. No dropped phone, no torn clothing, no surveillance footage. It seemed Kayla had completely vanished. As expected, her parents were devastated. Kayla was described as responsible and grounded, not the kind of person to run off without telling anyone. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Eventually, the case went cold. But then, a full year later, something happened. Kayla showed up. In the early morning hours of July 5th, 2009, she walked into a hospital nearly 200 miles from where she disappeared. She was disoriented, dehydrated, and barefoot. She was also noticeably thinner, sunburned, and wearing clothes that didn't belong to her.
Got a feeling that when she went out on the night of the town, somebody grabbed her and kept her, and she found the right opportunity to get away, but she probably couldn't find her clothes and stole the other guy's clothes, probably torturing her to death or leaving her outside in the sun. I mean, that's just rude. I don't know if that's the case, so let's just see what else they found out about her.
She refused to speak to doctors. She simply wrote her name down on a piece of paper. The hospital staff called police, and after fingerprint confirmation, it was officially her. She had been missing for 11 months. Her parents, of course, rushed to see her, but even then, Kayla said almost nothing. She stared at them blankly, occasionally smiling, but she didn't hug them. When they asked where she had been, she said only, "I was in the dark. I was safe, but it wasn't me." Authorities were baffled. She had no visible injuries or signs of abuse. Toxicology came back clean, She had no head trauma, no signs of having been drugged long term, no tattoos or branding or anything that would suggest organized abduction. She spent a week in the hospital under psychiatric observation, and then she was quietly released to her family. No charges were filed and no statements were ever made. Kayla never spoke publicly about where she had been. She deleted all her social media accounts and moved away within a year. Reporters tried to follow up, but her family refused all interviews. The case was officially closed, a missing person who returned, but no one ever got the answers they were looking for. Just a young woman who came back from somewhere completely changed. She wasn't hurt or injured, but she was different. One nurse from the hospital said that in her last shift before Kayla was discharged, the girl looked her dead in the eyes and whispered, "Don't go into the woods alone, they find you there." No one knows what she meant, but no one who worked that case ever forgot it.
That proves my suspicion. Went into the woods, somebody was hiding there, waiting to grab her. But if they didn't abuse her or give her head trauma, I don't know what's going on there. She probably went insane. And I get that she wants to leave that part of her life behind, but one day you're just going to feel like I got to write this down on paper until she's ready to open up about it.
In October 2017, in the city of Santa Rosa, California, a 15-year-old high school student named Connor Hastings disappeared while walking home from school. He took the same route every day, a suburban street surrounded by homes and parks, but one afternoon he didn't show up. His mom called him, but there was no answer. When she checked with friends, no one had seen him since he left school. By 7 p.m., police were notified and a search began immediately. His backpack was found a day later, dumped behind a dumpster a few blocks from his usual route, but his phone was gone. For weeks, the case dominated local headlines. Police dogs tracked a scent trail that ended suddenly at the edge of a wooded trail, where it seemed to just stop. It was strange because no tire tracks were left behind, and there were zero witnesses. When detectives questioned classmates, rumors began spreading. Some kids claimed Connor had been acting paranoid in the days just before he went missing, like he was jumping at noises and asking people if they'd seen the man in the red jacket. One friend said Connor had recently asked about how to tell if you're being watched. The trail went cold, but 5 minutes later, in March of 2018, Connor returned, or rather, he was found. A 911 call came in from a payphone, one of the few still operating in the area, and the caller reported a teenage boy sitting on a bench, unresponsive, outside a small-town library 60 miles away. When police found Connor, he was silent and staring ahead. His hair was much longer than when he'd last been seen, and his clothes were filthy. He had a spiral-bound notebook clutched in both hands, but it was completely blank. He wouldn't speak for over 24 hours. When his parents arrived, he hugged his mother tightly and then burst into tears. But even then, he said very little about where he had been. Over the next few days, he opened up only slightly. He claimed he had been taken by a group, but couldn't describe their faces. He said they kept him somewhere without clocks, somewhere cold. When police asked how he escaped, he said, "They just let me go. I think I passed their test." A month later, he gave one final statement before refusing to speak publicly again. He said, "There were others. I heard them. I wasn't the only one, but I might be the only one they gave back." The notebook he had been holding the night he was found remained empty. No one could get him to write anything in it. But on the final page in the bottom corner, written in shaky pen, were 4 words: "I was not alone." Police never identified any suspects. The FBI reviewed the case, but released no findings. Connor eventually changed schools and now lives under a different name. To this day, his case is officially solved because he came back. But nobody really believes that that's the end of the story.
Yeah, they're just trying to keep it hush-hush because that boy went through a lot of traumatic events. But that boy was really scared of his life that some people would be staring him down and then finally find the right moment to grab him and probably torture him. I was surprised that they just let him go. But I'd be taking him to a psychiatrist to go on to like hypnosis and see if he can like recall anything else to help the police and FBI narrow down who these people are. Because it'd be scary to think that they're still out there doing that and there's more kids that are missing because of these people. You just never know.
On the night of February 9th, 2004, a 21-year-old nursing student named Mora Murray vanished after a minor car crash on a remote stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. Nearly 2 decades later, no one knows where she went, what she was running from, or who might have been waiting for her. Earlier that day, Mora left her dorm at UMass Amherst after sending emails to her professors, telling them there had been a death in the family and she'd be gone for a few days. But no one in her family had died. In fact, no one in her life was planning to leave. She packed a bag, withdrew nearly all the money from her bank account, and bought a few items, including alcohol from a nearby store. Then she drove north into the White Mountains, alone and quietly, without a clear destination.
I think I heard about this case before. It was on Chillin' Scares video I reacted to. She's a top student, but then all of a sudden she withdraws a lot of money, buys alcohol, and drives away, and then she wrecks her car and nobody don't see her ever again. So something tells me she was stressed out to the point where she felt like somebody was watching her maybe and decided to skip town, or she just wanted to get away altogether. I don't know. I can't remember what Chillin' Scares found out, but let's continue with the story, shall we?
At approximately 7:27 p.m., a local woman called 911 to report a car accident outside her house. A small black Saturn had crashed into a snowbank on a sharp turn. When police arrived 20 minutes later, they found the vehicle, but no sign of the driver. The car was locked and the windshield was cracked. Both airbags had deployed. A box of wine was spilled across the interior. The only thing missing was Mora. A bus driver who lived nearby had seen her just minutes before police arrived. He stopped and spoke to her through the window. She looked cold and shaken, but declined help. He drove off and called in the accident, but by the time the officers reached the scene, Mora had vanished. Not just walked away, vanished. Police dogs tracked her scent for about 100 yards up the road, then it stopped abruptly. No footprints in the woods or any belongings left behind. It was like someone picked her up in a car just out of view. Her phone and credit cards were never used again. The bottles of alcohol she had bought, some were gone and some remained in the car. There were no obvious signs of foul play, but nothing added up. She had no history of mental illness. Friends and family said she wasn't suicidal. She was planning for the future. And yet, she was gone. In the years that followed, her case became one of the most obsessively followed mysteries on the internet. Armchair detectives, forums, and podcasters picked apart every detail. Some believed she staged her disappearance to start a new life.
That's what I was just thinking too.
Others believe she was abducted by a stranger or someone she arranged to meet. Then there are darker theories. A serial predator operating in the mountains, or a cover-up. But nothing concrete ever came, and her body was never found. Something obviously happened to Mora Murray that night. Something that was likely deliberate. And to this day, the forest around Route 112 still holds its secrets. The most chilling part is if she was taken, whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing and never made a single mistake. In the remote town of Nome, Alaska, a place isolated by hundreds of miles of tundra, accessible mostly by air, people are used to strange things happening. The winters are long and brutal, and the nights seem endless. But even there, among the quiet snow-covered streets and howling wind, the disappearance of Rick Hills in 2004 is something people still whisper about. Not because it was the only one, but because of how it happened and what was left behind. Rick Hills was a 37-year-old electrician, hardworking, quiet, not particularly social, but he was well liked by the people who knew him. He lived alone in a small cabin on the outskirts of town, near the edge of the wilderness. It was not unusual in Nome to be that isolated. Many people preferred it. But Rick's case became more disturbing when it was discovered he wasn't the first one to go missing from that area. In fact, in the 10 years before he vanished, over 20 people had disappeared from Nome under similarly strange circumstances.
Yeah, first off, I wouldn't judge people for living in small, isolated cabins at the edge of the wilderness. Like you said, some people prefer that instead of being closer to town. But then when you hear 20 more people disappeared in similar fashion like he did, then something is really off here. My guess is that they met somebody, wandered up to their cabins, talked for them, and then the person made them walk with them outside to probably kidnap them. You never know.
The FBI would eventually investigate it as a pattern, but Rick's story was different, more personal, terrifying. On November 13, 2004, Rick failed to show up for work. His boss called him repeatedly, to no avail. That evening, a coworker drove to Rick's cabin. His truck was there and the lights were off. It had snowed lightly that afternoon, but when they got closer, they noticed something strange. No footprints in or out of the cabin. It was like Rick had never left or returned. The coworker knocked, but there was no response. So he walked around the property and saw that the back door was open. He called out and stepped inside. The place was undisturbed. The coffee pot was full and his cell phone was on the table, but there was no sign of Rick himself. The weirdest part was the bed was made, not like someone had just gotten out of it. The weird part was that the bed was made so neatly, it looked as though no one had ever been in it. The coworker called the police and they searched the home. Then they searched the surrounding area and then the woods. They brought dogs, drones, helicopters, and still found nothing. Even with the light snowfall, there should have been some sign of direction, like a trail or blood or something, but there was no trace. The man walked out of his cabin with no coat, no boots, no keys, and simply just disappeared. The investigation didn't find foul play. He reportedly had no enemies or debts. Even his bank account was untouched, and his phone had not pinged a tower since the day before. But then, 2 days later, something happened that the public wasn't told about until years later. A hiker about 30 miles north of Nome found something bizarre. A man's sock frozen into the mud of a game trail. Nearby, hidden under a thin layer of snow, was an old Polaroid photograph. It was dirty and crumpled, and its image nearly destroyed by the cold. But the outline was clear. It was Rick's cabin, shot from the woods. The angle showed the living room window, and in the reflection was a face, but it wasn't Rick's. The photo was turned over to the police, but they never released it to the public. Years later, an officer who worked the case anonymously told a local journalist that it was the most disturbing thing he'd ever seen in his career, that the face in the reflection didn't look entirely human. He described it as off, like distorted, pale, the eyes too wide, and the mouth slightly open, as if it had been caught mid-whisper, like someone caught staring who didn't expect to be seen, as he described it. The area was searched again, but nothing was found, and no further signs of Rick. Locals started calling it the Watcher, saying something in the woods had been taking people. The disappearances dated back decades. Natives had legends about the Dark Man, a thing that lived between the trees and came out at night. When the FBI eventually got involved, they said the disappearances were likely due to weather, accidents, and alcohol. But not Rick. People close to the case knew better. They knew it wasn't weather and it wasn't a misadventure. Rick was used to those woods. He wouldn't have wandered out barefoot without a jacket in sub-zero temperatures. He would not have left his door open, and he wouldn't have vanished without a single track in the snow. To this day, Rick Hills has never been found. Some say it was just a tragic accident. Others say Rick saw something he shouldn't have, something that was watching him.
I guarantee you that who or whatever was watching him scared him so bad that he figured that he'd just go ahead and leave the cabin. But by the time he started running, that person grabbed him and possibly deleted him. You never know. And I hate to even think about that, but that's the only thing I could come up with. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this Mr. Nightmare video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more content from his channel. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap, and have a nice day, y'all.